Good evening. Welcome to St. Andrew here this evening. We have our guest speaker who is over here on my right. Cesar is making his way up front to join us. I'll introduce him in just a moment. I have a couple of announcements before I introduce him to you. Great to have you here for confirmation night and this family evening that we have periodically here at St. Andrew as a part of the confirmation program to have students and also parents here together, learning together. And so it's a great model that we've had for several years now. Little opportunities here and there to do some shared family learning and faith building. And so great to have you. Great to have you here. I'm Pastor Peter Johnson. Shauna Berg would also normally be here, but is a student at Luther Seminary and is somewhere in the middle of Germany on a trip to study Germany and Lutheran history. And so for she'll be back on Sunday and back at the office here on Monday. But we are welcoming all of you here. Glad for me to be here as well to welcome you. We have an upcoming event on the 7th of February for 6th and 7th graders, a day retreat that's scheduled here in the Twin Cities. There'll be a little time at the Mall of America and some other events. So that is coming up here on the 6th, on the 7th of February for 6th and 7th graders. Stand by for more information from Megan Kelly about that. Also, there is the retreat at Spirit in the Pines on the 20th through the 22nd of February for all ages as well to get up to Spirit in the Pines on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So that registration is also online. Megan and Shauna will get that additional information about that. Again, that's on the 20th through the 22nd of February coming up in less than a month. And so I want to welcome Cesar as he joins us here from Richfield. He is a longtime friend of our Shauna Berg's. And so they have worked together, and Shauna has such an appreciation for him. And when she found out, and we were thinking, what do we do for a family night? She said, I know exactly the person to bring. And so they've known each other for many years. He's a youth worker with high school youth right now. He is the area director for the Richfield Young Life and is connected to Hope Church as well, and is good at helping people, kids, as well as all of us, discover gifts and passions of each individual person, especially for youth. And Cesar is married with 3 kids as well. And it's great to have you here at St. Andrew here tonight. Let's give him a welcome to St. Andrew. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Peter. Um, I don't know how I feel about intros. I'd rather have no expectations. My favorite speaking engagement to do is actually what I've discovered is officiating weddings. I've officiated 12. I would not say I'm a wedding officiant. However, I like officiating weddings, and here's why. The bar is set so low. Like, no one goes to a wedding and thinks, oh, I hope I get something out of this. They're just like, when is it done? Like, that's the only thing they say. And so when I've done weddings and made it slightly entertaining and it connects with people, it's just the best because people are like, oh my goodness, that was such a great wedding. Uh, so for this one, set the expectations low. However, I want to start with what Shauna told me is the vision of this church. And I thought it was just the youth, but Pastor Peter said this is actually the whole church. That these 3 things are important, that you matter, that you belong, and that we care. I shared that it's kind of heartbreaking that that needs to be the tagline of the church. But the truth is there are a lot of people that look at church and church people and they wonder, do I even matter? And so I just want you to know that the simplicity of these phrases is actually powerful. And so I'm going to dive into these phrases, but I looked on the website and there's a few things that I noticed. It says, we welcome young children, youth, and families as they are, period. I just like the boldness of that's what it is. We accept you. We want you as you are. And when I was thinking about what that looks like, that's hospitality. And one of my favorite quotes about hospitality comes from Henry Nouwen. He says, true hospitality is welcoming the stranger on her own terms. This kind of hospitality can only be offered by those who found the center of their lives in their own hearts. That if you're insecure, it's really hard to create space for other people. But when you have security and you know who you are, you can actually offer up hospitality to others. And now it also says this: hospitality is not to change people, but to offer them space where change can take place. So I just want you to think about hospitality. Are you do you extend hospitality to people, or are you just creating space for yourself? We have to ask some of those questions. And this is what I found: is you matter, you belong, and we care. So we're going to lean into that. But I want to start with this question: who are you following? Who are you following? If you are on social media, you might know this. There's a lot of people to follow. But if you're a little bit older, I'm not going to point you out. You know who you are. You might know that one of the first people that had an endorsement that people followed was a guy named Michael Jordan. Okay. He was an actual basketball player. He wasn't just about the shoes. Young kids these days, like, he was an actual basketball player. And Converse was selling the weapon. I don't know if you knew this, the Converse weapon, but the Air Jordan came out and was the first signature shoe that was about a person. So we're always following people, and to the point where they had Wheaties, which was the grossest cereal that I ever had, but I bought it. There's like literally no flavor, but because I was following Michael Jordan, I wanted to eat what he ate. I wanted to drink Gatorade and be like Mike. But today, we follow different people. So this is the most followed person on TikTok. We also follow people on Instagram. So this is the most followed list of people on Instagram. So I just want you to start to think, who are you following? I live in Richfield, pretty close to the Mall of America, and one of my favorite things to do is people watch at the Mall of America. And I saw a crowd gathering around this place called Rock of Ages. It's a mini golf course. It's really not that cool, but I was wondering, why are there so many people outside of this mini golf course? And then I heard the crowd erupt, and I saw who was walking outside, who just left the mini golf course. And I know them all, so I cut through the food court, and I got in front of this whole crowd, and I recorded this video. So this whole crowd is following this person. Didn't share the whole video, but it's about 2 minutes long. This whole crowd was following that one person. I don't know if you caught it, but it is Aaron Rodgers when he was playing for the Green Bay Packers. So when I pull my phone out, Aaron Rodgers looks at me and he just shakes his head. I'm like laughing. And this whole crowd is following Aaron Rodgers. And I went back and I watched the video again. And here's a still shot. Okay, look at the lady next to him. You see that? This lady is taking a selfie and he like looks away. And I just thought it was so funny. Like, she ran ahead and she took this picture. And I'm sure she sent it to her friends and was like, look, me and Aaron Rodgers at the Mall of America. Was she really with him? No. Did she really know him? No. But I remember leaving the mall and I was preaching the next day at church. And I realized that it's possible to follow Jesus and not even know him. It's possible to be following the crowd, following Jesus, and not really know who he is. It's possible to take selfies at church or on a mission trip and say, look at me and Jesus. Look at me, Jesus, at camp. But it's possible to follow someone that you do not know. And I'm not saying this because I want you to feel bad. I want you to actually ask the question, are you really following Jesus? Or are you just following the people going to church? Because when I was growing up, this is where I went to church. St. William's. And in my understanding of faith, is that when I got confirmed, I graduated from church. I'm not saying that that's what's happening here. That's what's happening in my mind, was that once I get confirmed, I can throw a party, make money. This is just what happened in my faith background. You can throw a confirmation party, make some money, and then I don't have to go to church anymore. So my faith and my lifestyle in high school didn't connect. I would do what the popular kids did because I was trying to be popular. And I'd go to church on Sunday. So my faith and lifestyle didn't really have anything to do with each other. And I won't go into the details, but the last day of school, my junior year, I got caught drinking. I was underage. The cops came to the party I was at, and I got a minor consumption. And I remember feeling it like a disappointment to my friends, to my family. I was going to be the captain of the basketball team my senior year. And I just remember thinking I failed. And I stopped hanging out with all my friends because they started doing cocaine and other drugs. And I just said, I can't be with you anymore. And so that summer, going into my senior year, I had no friends. I had to step away from the friend group that I spent my whole life trying to get. And then I found some friends that were Christians. I didn't know what that meant. They just didn't do anything illegal. And I just felt safe around them because we would hang out and then we would just go home. And I go, okay, this is probably a good influence for me. And so one day in August, they said, hey, in a couple of weeks, we're going on a mission trip to California. And I said, well, I've never been on a mission trip. I don't even know what that is. They said, well, you should come with. And I did the math. It was like $10 a day. I'm like, that's a good deal. Cheap vacation. I was like, all right, I'm in. And we go to a church. And I remember the first time singing a song about Jesus with a guitar. That was weird to me. I remember singing the name Jesus. I'm like, whoa, what? I'm not used to that. And then I remember getting to Los Angeles, and we were doing service projects, and we were cleaning out toilets, and we were painting schools, and I was doing things that I would never do if my parents asked, but I was having fun because I was with my friends. And then I remember one of the things that we were supposed to do when we were in Los Angeles was go find a homeless person and ask them where a good place to eat is, and then ask them to join us. So here I am, just a scared 17-year-old kid, not wanting to talk to anyone because they look scary. And we asked this guy, hey, where's a good place to eat? And he looked up at us and he goes, oh, there's a Subway right down the street. And we were having a conversation with him, and he was laughing and he was joyful. And I was thinking, man, why are you even happy? You're homeless. Like, what is the deal? And so we go to Subway, and this happened in the 1900s. This is a long time ago, 1998. But I remember he ordered a 6-inch cold cut combo. And I remembered because I thought that's the cheapest and shortest sandwich on the menu. We're buying you lunch. I would have bought a foot long. I would have got one to go, but he orders a 6-inch cold cut combo. And then we're having a conversation with him, and my leader asks him, Luke, what do you know about Jesus? He smiled even bigger. And he said, man, without Jesus, I'd have nothing. He said, man, without Jesus, I'd have nothing. Here I am, a 17-year-old kid that was confirmed, sitting across from him, but I've never had Jesus in my life that changed the way I saw my life. I'll say that again. I never had Jesus in my life that actually changed the way that I saw people or myself. I just went to church. And so from that time, I spent my life trying to figure out, what does it mean that I experienced Jesus in my life at a Subway sub shop and not in church sometimes? I had to believe that Jesus is not just working in the church, but he's working beyond it. And I started looking for the work in my life. So I want you to think, do you really follow Jesus? Or is it just something that you do? Because my life has changed. That homeless guy, Luke, ruined my life. I'm just going to tell you that. I had plans for my life, and it wasn't this. But I will tell you, I've experienced peace beyond understanding because I trust that I'm walking with him. And as I've journeyed through my life with Jesus, Hebrews 12 has really been something that I gravitate towards. And it says this, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, Let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus. I just want that to be the central point is, are your eyes fixed on Jesus, or is your attention somewhere else? Fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. When I was 17, that was the first time I actually started fixing my eyes on Jesus, and that began to change my behavior. It began to change how I treated people. It began to change how I treated myself when I looked in the mirror. I wasn't a mistake. I wasn't a problem. And so the reason why I love working with middle school and high school students is because I believe that the earlier you put your faith in Christ, the better off your life will be. The more you start living for him, the earlier your journey will look better. Are you following Jesus? Now, a little pop quiz. I want you to see if anyone knows these characters. You look confused. Have you seen this before, right? Okay. I'm like, where am I right now? No one. Okay. So let's start with looking at the screen on the left. Well, who is it? The Scarecrow. Okay. Just shout it. I know it's a Lutheran church. Just shout it. It's okay. And what does the Scarecrow want? No, a brain. If I only had a brain. So sometimes we think the journey of faith is I just need to know more about Jesus. I just need to go to church, and I want to go to a church that I can learn more about Jesus. That's part of it, but that's not all of it. Okay, so I want you to learn, but that's not everything. Let's jump to the far right. The furry guy, what is his name? The lion. The what lion? The cowardly lion. And what does he want? Courage. Courage. Here's courage. Courage is not the absence of fear, but it's peace in the midst of fear. Okay, I want you to think it's not about not being afraid. It's actually having faith in something larger than your fear. That's how you get courage. You have faith in something bigger than your fears. Here's another thing about courage. I can't give it to you. God can't give you courage, but he can give you opportunities to be courageous. And I'm looking at this front row. Yes, courageous. Some of you are like, I'm going to be back here. That's okay. I'm not judging you. But it takes courage to do some things that are uncomfortable. That's part of faith. Jesus doesn't say, take up your couch and follow me. I don't know what version of the Bible you read. He doesn't say, take up your couch. He says, take up your cross. That's uncomfortable. That's hard. That's a sacrifice. So the faith, you need to learn more about Jesus. You have to have some courage, but let's go to the silver guy. What does he want? The Tin Man, and he wants a heart. Part of the journey of faith is having passions. It's having your heart break when you see things that are heartbreaking. And that is part of the journey of faith, is that when you see struggle of someone else, you respond with compassion, because that's what Jesus did. So your heart has to be in it. But the star of the show is who? Dorothy. And what does she want? She wants to go home because there's no place like home. There's no place like home. I'll say it one more time. There's no place like home. Here's when that quote that Henry Nouwen said about hospitality. We can't extend home to someone else if we don't know this for ourselves. Where is home for you? And so the reason why I had you grab note cards and writing utensils, I actually want you to think about it. Where is home for you? And I'm not just talking about your address. And here's what I want you to think. Where do you just feel comfortable? Where can you be yourself? Okay. And I'll just give you examples. For me, my home was at the gym growing up because I played basketball and I stopped growing. So then it was pretty easy. I wasn't going to make the league. However, I spent so much time. So even to this day, I feel at home at Lifetime Fitness, just shooting free throws. Okay, I'm going to give you a moment to think about it and play some music, but I actually want you to write down, where is home for you? What does that look like? And so go ahead, think about it. If you didn't grab a note card or pen, you can just put it in your phone, but I do actually want you to start to type out where's home for you.
Oh, somewhere over the rainbow, way up high, and the dreams that dream of once in the goodbye. I oh, somewhere over the rainbow, bluebirds fly.
Give you 30 more seconds to think about it and write it down or type it in.
Someday wish you gonna stop.
Okay. Now here's an opportunity for you to be courageous. Like I said, I shared home for me is playing basketball or being with my family. It doesn't have to be in our house. Home for me is also being with my friends. And so I'm going to just ask someone courageous, where is home for you? Just raise your hand. If you're feeling like this right here, that means you're supposed to, yep, there you go. Family and animals. Okay. What else? Yeah. Say it again. At the ocean. I love that. I went to school in Santa Barbara. I feel that when you're by the ocean, you're like, wow. Okay, where else? Be courageous. Yeah.
Quiet library in
Oh,
like the basement with minimal heat.
okay. I love that. I love the details of that. He says, in a empty library, and then he goes to basement with no people reading quietly, lights off. Just like so. But here's the thing: if we don't know what home looks like and feels like for us, it's hard to guide people there. And I do feel like we need to come to the reality: if we don't feel at home anywhere, we have to find home somewhere. And so I really want you to think, where is home for you? What does it look like for you? What does home mean to you? Because if we don't find our home, we're just wandering around life. And I have a lot of friends that I went to high school with that are still doing that. I'm glad that I had a midlife crisis at 9. When I was 9 years old, I had a midlife crisis. And so I didn't have to be 49, you know? Like, so the earlier you ask this question, who am I? The better. What I do know about you without knowing you is that your fingerprints actually tell you a little bit about who you are. Even identical twins have different fingerprints. Your hands tell you that you are one of a kind, that you're unique. I spent my whole life trying to be someone else. And this is one of my favorite quotes about identity. It says, be yourself. Everyone else is already taken. Just let that hit you. Because I was trying to grow up and I was trying to be someone else. I was performing for other people and I was losing myself in the process. And I don't know if you've seen this or heard this, but some people say your identity is like an iceberg. And we might feel it because we're in Minnesota. I was like, is it cold? No, it's this idea that beneath the surface is your character. That's who you really are. I want you to think about this at school. Do you care more about your character or do you care more about your reputation? Because in middle school, I cared way more about my reputation. And I spent more time trying to make sure everyone liked me. And I didn't really care how I felt, who I was really when no one was looking. That's your character. But here's the different part. Raise your hand if you have good eyesight and you can see that red piece at the top. Okay. That is what I call your selfie image. That's not even your self-image. Your self-image is the way you view yourself. Your selfie image is how you hope other people view you through your social media accounts or your LinkedIn. I see some older people, maybe LinkedIn. So you're about your resume, you're about these things. Here is the problem. When you ask this question, who am I? And we spend the majority of our lives dealing with and focusing on and fixing our eyes on the smallest part of who we are. Do you understand why it's problematic? Do you understand why there's a generation right now that is the highest in depression and anxiety and the most medicated generation? Do you understand? Because they're asking the question, who am I? And they're not fixing their eyes on Jesus. They're fixing their eyes on what everyone else says about them. And we spend more time finding our identity in those things than this. Do you understand where the problem is? The sooner you get to find your identity in here and ask the question, who am I? And you discover who you are through scripture, the better. So just lean into this question, who am I? And some of you are asking, like, who are you? Okay, I'll tell you. I'll start by who I'm not. And if you follow any Christian megachurch pastors, I will say I speak places, but I am not Francis Chan. However, I've been confused as Francis Chan just because he's Chinese and I'm Asian too. And it's awkward because I've been to a conference where some guy was excited to get a picture with him, and it was like the Walmart version of Francis Chan. It was so weird because they're like, "Oh my gosh, I heard you speak." I'm like, "Yeah, great." Then he named a city I've never been to, and I go, I think you think I'm Francis Chan." And he just walked away. It was the weirdest interaction. So sometimes we get this identity crisis because people think we are who we are. But I'll tell you why I had a midlife crisis at 9 years old. It's because my name. I want you to think of how much you're putting your identity in your name. My name is Cesar Castillejos, and I say it like I'm from Fridley. Okay, some of you got that one. That's funny. You can laugh at that. The thing is, my name is fully Spanish, but I'm Filipino. And the Spanish colonized the Philippines, and there are a lot of Filipinos with Spanish names. So if I introduce myself as Cesar Castillejos, people will say, "Hola, Cesar," and I say, "Lo siento, I'm from Fridley." Like, that's what I have to say. So my whole life, people didn't know how to say my name. They were speaking Spanish to me. I said, "Well, actually, I'm Filipino." And then they'd say, "Oh, great, I know some Filipino words." And then they'd speak Tagalog, and I'm like, my parents only taught me English. Sorry, I can understand Tagalog. I can't speak it. So then I was a disappointment to Spanish speakers and Filipinos. And I would go to school, and at the time, Fridley was predominantly white. So I would go to school, and I didn't fit in. And my name really made me feel like this. I don't fit in anywhere. And my prayer was like, "God, just show me where I fit in." The puzzle piece I gave you, I just really want you to think of, where have you felt like you didn't belong? Okay, I'm not going to give you time to think about it. I just want that to represent, hey, this is where I didn't feel like I belonged. Because my prayer was like, "God, you show me the box. Here's what God did with my life." He said, "Nope, I'm going to give you a bunch of this." That's how God works. But my name is Cesar. I say Cesar, but I get Caesar, Cesar, Cesar, Cesar. I don't correct anybody, just so you know. Just look in my direction, say, "Hey," and I'll talk to you. But I go by Cesar. My dad's name is Cesar, so then I go by JR with Filipinos. Some people call me J, Ces, CJ, but I just want you to think, how much of your identity is wrapped up in your name? Sometimes we put our identity in our families. This is the family I grew up in. My older brother, Carlo, my older sister, Tina. I don't know if you've heard of T-Rex cookies. If you raise your hand if you've heard of T-Rex cookies. Okay, that's my sister, Tina Rexing. That's why it's T-Rex. People think it's because the cookies are big. No, her name is Tina Rexing. But that's Tina. And then my dad, Cesar, and my mom, Faye. So that's the family I grew up in. Here's the family I belong to now. I got my son, Cruz, my wife, Kate, my daughter, Cora, in the white dress, and my daughter, Kalia, in the orange dress. I want you to think of your identity. Sometimes we put our identity in our families. Sometimes we put our identity in what we do. When I was in middle school, this is what I did: skateboard and play basketball. That's what I wanted to be known for. And you don't grow out of this. So adults, I just want you to think, where are you putting your identity? Think about your LinkedIn. Think about you don't grow out of this. We find our identities in our jobs, who we're employed by. I'm employed by Young Life, Hope Church. I'm also sometimes we put our identity in what we do. I get to speak in a lot of different places. Another job that I have, it's kind of strange. I was explaining that I went to high school with this guy. I don't know if you know him, Chris Lindahl. Have you ever seen a billboard of him? Okay. So Chris was one of my donors for Young Life, and he said, "Man, if you can change a city with volunteer leaders, I need you to work with me." So I do personal coaching with our agents and employees at Chris Lindahl Real Estate. And then if someone shares about their faith, then I become a chaplain. It's just weird. It's a weird role. Like I talk about their gifts and talents through the Gallup Strengths Finder or Working Genius, if any of you know those assessments. And then I really think it's, well, God created you this way. And then we start talking about life. So it's a weird role. I had a weird interaction today where I was like coached this agent into a new job. I don't think Chris liked that, but that's okay. So do we find our identity in what we do? Do we find our identity in what we own, the houses we live in? I've started a clothing company called One of One Clothing Company. So that's something that I own and operate. We find our identity in where we live, the city that you're from. I'm from Richfield. I'm going somewhere with this, but I really want you to think. I just shared a bunch of stuff about me. Where are you putting your identity? Middle schoolers, I want you to think, what do you put in your identity? Are you a hockey player? And I'm not saying hockey's bad or any jobs that you have are bad. I just want you to think, are you fixing your eyes and identity rooted in those things? And here's the question: if you weren't there anymore, would you still know who you are? If you lost your job, would you still know who you are? If you couldn't play hockey or basketball, would you still know who you are? One thing I do like about the Mall of America, it is by Richfield is by the Mall of America. Like I said, that's where I met Aaron Rodgers. We were hanging out for a brief second. But I do remember one time I was walking around the mall and I was behind a mom and her middle school daughter. And it's just weird when you're walking the same direction as people and they think you're following them. So I'm like, oh, just trying not to pass them. And this is awkward, like pacing thing. I'm like, oh, when can I pass them? So I'm close enough to hear what they're talking about. And the daughter was talking about the lunch table. And she was talking about how these girls took her spot at the lunch table. And I work in middle school lunchrooms. That's the only place I feel insecure about who I am. Like I can do anything, but I've sat down in middle school lunchrooms and then the whole table gets up and moves away. So I know that pain. And the daughter is explaining this, and the mom stops and says, "Build a bridge and get over it." I stopped because they were right in front of me, and this was super awkward. Now I'm like listening to her getting lectured. I watched the girl's face drop to the ground. Because what she heard from her mom was this: your problems don't matter. Get over it. And I share that because how many times when we should respond with compassion, which means, okay, tell me more about how that made you feel, and we say things like build a bridge and get over it. Because what's heartbreaking is that we all want to belong and we want to know we matter, right? That's why I'm going this direction, because I want to establish this idea that all of us want to know that we matter and that we belong somewhere. So instead of telling people build a bridge and get over it, we need to build a bridge and get into it. We need to say, hey, tell me more about that. Yesterday, I got a chance to do a dad's night with my son, Cruz, at church. And I just love being around him and his friends and watching him interact with his friends, because who he is at home is who he is at school. And that's my, like, I love that he feels at home at school. And here's a little video of him. And he did this weird thing in the gym when we were running around, and I'll just play this. Jason. He says, chase me. So in the beginning of the video, he says, chase me. Then I run around and I chase him and I grab him. And he's not running in fear. I just want you to know, look at his face. He didn't think I'm going to punish him. Parents, I want you to think, I catch him. What do you think he says next? Again. Okay, you're right. He says, again. And I'm like, I just got you. And then this went on like 6 or 7 times. And every time he wasn't running in fear, he was like, catch me. And then I was just thinking, why is this even fun? Like, I'm going to catch you. And he's like, again. And when I just thought about what is going on in his mind, I realized this: we all want to be pursued. There's something within us, whether you're a child or adult, we're wired to be pursued. We want to know that we matter. We want to know that people care about us. When we apply for a job and we don't get it, we know how that feels because we know that we want to be pursued. And that's why Jesus said, let the little children come to me, because they know. They haven't gotten too old for this. And so I want to jump into a passage that really encapsulates everything that I've been talking about and the phrases, you matter, you belong, and we care. And I'm going to jump into Mark chapter 5, starting verse 21. It says this: when Jesus had again crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake, it said a large crowd gathered around him while he was by the lake. Then one of the synagogue leaders named Jairus came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. So a couple of things I want to point out: that he's a religious person, and not only is he religious, he's a synagogue leader. And his name is Jairus. So if your name is in Scripture, you have a very important role. People knew who he was. His reputation preceded himself. Everyone knew who Jairus was. But he fell at Jesus' feet and he pleaded earnestly with him, my little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so that she will be healed and live. So Jesus went with him. It's possible to be very religious and have a problem that you need Jesus to heal. I just want you to think, okay, do I think my religion is actually going to protect me from problems? And the answer is no, it's not. And so somehow, some way, the synagogue leader knew that he couldn't pray himself out of this, that he needed to go to Jesus. So I want to point out, Jairus, the synagogue leader, his little daughter is dying. He needed to go to Jesus. The story continues. It says a large crowd followed and pressed around him. I'm picturing Aaron Rodgers at the Mall of America and everyone crowded around him. So Jesus is walking through this crowd. And a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. What's her name? Woman. Anonymous. No one cared about her. No one knew she existed. She didn't matter to a lot of people. It says that she had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had, yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. So she's broke, lonely, questioning her existence, wondering if she mattered. But when she heard about Jesus, like Jairus, it says this: she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak because she thought, if I just touch his clothes, I'll be healed. I have to explain something here so we get the fullness of the story. The people thought because she was so sick that if someone touched her, they would get sick. So if you were sick in that time, they would put you in quarantine. Remember at COVID when you got to go home? Remember that? That's crazy. That was 5 years ago. But they quarantined her and they said, we don't want you around public because if you touch someone, you're going to get them sick. So imagine that you have no friends, that you're outcast for 12 years. What's one word to describe how you would be feeling? Sad, broken, lost, like you don't matter, okay? But she heard about Jesus, and she's heard that this guy named Jesus was healing people and touching lepers, and they were being healed. And in her mind, she goes, I don't even need to talk to him. She said, if I just touch his cloak, I hear that this Jesus is so holy that I can just be around him. If I just touch the hem of his garment, I'll be healed. So she breaks the law. She goes through the crowd. She sneaks in, knowing that she can be punished for what she's doing. She touches his cloak. In verse 29, it says, immediately her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. Suffering for 12 years, and in an instant, she feels life is changed. But the story continues. It says, at once, Jesus realized that power had gone out from him. He turned around in the crowd and asked, who touched my clothes? So picture this huge crowd following Jesus. They're going to heal a dying girl, so they're probably walking fast. They're going through the city, and Jesus stops. The whole crowd stops thinking, why are you stopping? Like, oh, it must be something important. We must have forgotten something in the boat. And Jesus says, who touched my clothes? That's pretty ridiculous, right? Because in context, he had just calmed the sea and healed a demon-possessed person. And so the disciples see him do all these crazy things, and he's like, who touched my clothes? Their response just says it all. It says, you see all the people crowding against you, his disciples answered, and yet you can ask who touched me. They're thinking like, what are you talking about? Why is that important right now? It's important because what's important to Jesus isn't always important to us. What's important to Jesus sometimes is a little different than what we expect. It says that Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. So I think Jesus is like sitting like this. The woman's trying to sneak off. Her life is healed. And Jesus, I'm like, I'm not moving. Who touched my clothes? I felt something. Who was it? Then the woman, knowing what had happened, came and fell at his feet, trembling with fear, told him the whole truth. You think that took some courage? She thought she was going to be punished. And she's just thinking in her mind, I've been suffering for 12 years, and finally I get a moment, and I'm healed, and finally my life has changed, and now I'm going to be punished again. Jesus' response changed her life. He says this, daughter. I'm going to pause there. Because for 12 years, she thought she didn't belong. For 12 years, she thought my life, people are taking advantage of me. They're taking my money. They're scamming me. No one cares about me. The reason why Jesus stopped is because he needed to cut through all the lies, and he needed to say, I'm not here just to heal your body. I want to heal your mind. I want to heal your spirit, and I want you to know that you belong. And he used this word, daughter. It's a family term. He didn't say broken woman. He didn't say outcast. With one word, he says, you belong to me. He says, daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering. While Jesus was still speaking, some of the people came from Jairus' house. The synagogue leader, your daughter is dead. They said, why bother the teacher anymore? Overhearing what they said, Jesus told him, don't be afraid, just believe. He did not let anyone follow him except for Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. And when they came to the house of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw a commotion with people crying and wailing loudly. He went in and said to them, why all this commotion and wailing? The child is not dead, but asleep. But they laughed at him. And here's how the story ends. It says, after he put them all out, he took the child's father and mother and the disciples who were with him. He went in where the child was. He took her by the hand and said to her, Talitha cum, which means, little girl, I say to you, get up. It was a phrase that a father would say to a daughter. Immediately, the girl stood up and began to walk around. She was 12 years old, the same amount of time that this woman was suffering. At this, they were completely astonished. He gave strict orders not to let anyone know about this and told them to give her something to eat. What I want to point out about this story is that you have powerful, privileged person named Jairus, and you have a broke, lonely woman. Jesus stopped for both. Jesus stopped for both because he wanted to say, Jairus, you matter. Sometimes we feel guilty for having the things that God has blessed us with, and we pretend like we don't have them anymore. And sometimes we have to accept that Jesus stops for Jairus. He loves people that have things, but he also loves people that don't have anything and no one. And he says to both of them, you matter. He says to both of them, you belong. And he says to both of them, I care. So when you think of this whole movement in this church with those phrases, I hope that you're brought back to this story because it says it all here. But here's the caution. Religious people find God useful. Gospel people find him beautiful. Where are you in that? Because growing up, God was useful. I prayed to him when I needed something. But when you understand that this is a God that stops for a broken woman and says, I know what you've been telling yourself for 12 years, but I call you daughter, that changes things. You matter. Here's why you matter. Jesus says this, you are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. You matter because the world needs you. Do you know that we're living in some dark times? I don't know if you're aware of that. Okay, some of you look confused. Do you know, right now is not the best time? And I was sharing with a couple of people back there, the good thing about dark times is that dim lights shine bright. So in middle school, you can actually be a friend to the girl that doesn't have anywhere to sit, and that can change her life. You can actually show up and be respectful to your teachers, or find someone that is afraid to be in school and just give them somewhere where they feel safe. Little things change. So my hope and prayer is that you go out and you know that you are the light of the world. You belong. And Jesus extends this invitation, and I want you to hear it and see what he means. Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Opportunity to be courageous. Anyone tired out there? Okay, you can be wrong. Some of you, yep. There's some like, yes, I'm tired. Some like, yeah, that's me. I know we're all tired to some degree, and we try to find rest in other places, Netflix or wherever. But Jesus says, come to me, and I will give you rest. He says, take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I'm gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls, not just your body. And I believe that when Jesus spoke to this woman and said, daughter, she finally rested with her soul. So I want you to know that Jesus extends this invitation because you belong. And when I was a new Christian, I didn't know what a yoke was. So just being honest, I thought it was an egg yolk. And I was just like, yep, that makes sense. Doesn't make sense. But Jesus was talking about one of these. And a yoke, this is what it's used for. To take two animals that are working and put them side by side. So what Jesus was actually saying is saying, you belong to me because I want to live this life next to you. Jesus does not say, let anyone come to me, all who are weary, and jump on my saddle and enjoy the ride. He doesn't say, jump on my chariot and watch me conquer everything. He says, I want to be yoked next to you so when you are weak, I can pull you through it. I want to be yoked next to you so when you have joy in your life, I can experience it with you. You belong, but you belong next to Jesus, walking with him through the ups and downs of life. And we care because he did. In Matthew 9, it says this, Jesus went through all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom and healing every disease and sickness. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them. I want to pause there just to explain what compassion is. The word passion means suffering. Compassion means to suffer with. So Jesus' natural reaction to suffering was compassion. I have to say this because this is the only way out of the mess that we're in right now. That sometimes when we see hard things on TV or videos, if your natural reaction is not compassion, that's not Jesus. If your natural reaction is not compassion, but it's your keyboard to make comments, that's a problem. When you see hard things happening and your heart breaks, that means you're alive. That because compassion means to suffer with. So when Jesus saw people being harassed and helpless, this is what the scriptures say. He had compassion on them. And then he said to his disciples, "The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field." We have opportunities to be compassionate all around us. My hope is that we step in. And I got to experience compassion the other day when I was at the gym. And I posted this video because I had to stop from my workout. And I posted this video, and I don't know if you will listen to the radio, a guy named Henry Lake. Does anyone know who that is? So he saw the video, and then he invited me to be on his radio show. But it was all because of this guy came up to me in the gym. So this guy's named James. I don't know him very well, but he noticed one thing about me, that I'm brown, okay? So he noticed that. I can't hide this all the time. So I'm working out at the gym, and he just comes up to me, and he says, "How are you doing, man?" And I told him, I'm not a victim. However, I got to adjust my life. I have my passport on me at all times. I told him that when I get in a car, my daughters from the back seat say, "Dad, you got your passport?" And I'm like, "Yep." And I have to pretend like that's normal. And I told them, because my wife was out of town, that I had to have my daughters memorize someone else's phone number just in case something happens. And I said, "Honey," I told my girls, I said, "if something happens, I'll be back." I have the privilege of having a passport and that I'm actually a U.S. citizen. So I just said, "I'll be back." But I'm explaining to him the reality that I have to live in, and I'm watching his heartbreak for me. And then he goes to the locker room, and then he comes back 15 minutes later, and he hands his phone number and his email address, and he says, "Man, if you need anything, just call me." And what I realize is that's compassion. And that's what Jesus did. But here's what I want you to leave with and kind of know is that compassion has three components. One is proximity. You got to be near it. You got to move towards it. When you see something happening to a friend at school and you move into that, that means you're getting close to it. But it also requires presence. Have you ever been in a room where everyone's on their phone? Proximity, yes. Presence, no. So when you actually have proximity and presence, you can actually begin to feel their pain. And you're never too young to have compassion on someone that's hurting. So these are the things. You matter, you belong, and we care. This is what I want us to kind of, as I wrap this up, I want you to know that you do belong somewhere. That although your life might feel like this, God gives us this. Some people don't know how to read those, especially kids. It gives us time. So God gives us time. And over time, things make sense. And I have a phrase that I live by. It says, you live your life forward and you understand it backwards. That instead of trying to figure it all out right now and understand it, I just say, you know what? I'm going to live my life forward and understand it looking back. And here's what I'll say about what I told myself in 7th grade what I wanted to do. This is what I said. Teacher or basketball player, that's the dilemma. He's not sure which he will become, but whichever he chooses, he is sure that his teachers have been a tremendous influence. My physical education teachers have been great. They know how to motivate me and have really helped me improve my basketball skills. As a teacher, he believes that through his leadership role, he could motivate students too. Next to physical education, Cesar most enjoys geography. I really like to learn about other cultures. I want to know what other people think. Do we see them the way they really are, and how do they see us? What can we do to understand each other better? I was a smart seventh grade. I don't know what happened after that. I read this and I'm like, what? I said that? But I realized that God was doing a work in my life before I was following him. And now I can work cross culturally because no one knows what I am ethnically. God used my biggest insecurity growing up as my greatest asset. That I know how to speak cross culturally because I felt like I didn't fit in anywhere. I would have never thought I'd be speaking about Jesus, but I thought I could because I actually did meet Francis Chan. And I took this picture and I told him, "You're the reason why I can see myself as an Asian person preaching the gospel because I saw it." And he signed my CDs that I burned his sermons on. He autographed it. I don't ask for autographs. But here's what I want to end with was this story about him preaching at Bethel. And I realized we were wearing a very similar outfit. So I'm after chapel thinking, I want to get out of here without people thinking I'm him. So I'm walking through the lobby and this woman sees me and I'm like, oh no, she thinks I'm Francis Chan. I start walking faster. I hear her steps getting faster behind me. I get out the front door. I'm almost running through the parking lot. And this woman says, Cesar. And I stopped. And this woman comes up to me and she says, I don't think you remember me. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm thinking, I'm great. I'm great you said that because I don't know who you are. She goes, I'm Miss Lindell. I was your homeroom teacher when you were in seventh grade. She goes, I just want to say how proud I am of you because I prayed for you every day. I prayed that God would use you to change lives. And my daughter has heard you speak, and my daughter goes to Bethel, and she sends me the notes from your chapel sermons. She goes, I just want to say thank you for allowing God to use you all these years later. And she posted it about it, and she just encouraged all of her teachers to keep praying. And I share that because even before I was following Jesus, God was doing something in my life through people and through prayer. And so what I want to leave with you is that even though you're in middle school and maybe you're not serious about your faith, God is doing something in you that he wants to use for the kingdom. And really, I want to leave you with this benediction as you go. So if you could all stand. I've been grateful for this time. I'll stick around if you have any questions or anyone wants to talk. But receive this benediction as you go. You go nowhere by accident. Wherever you go, God is sending you. Wherever you are, God has put you there. God has a purpose in you being there. Christ lives in you and has something he wants to do through you where you are. Believe this and go in the grace and love and power of Jesus Christ. Amen. Thank you.